In other big developments, Kremlin has now confirmed that United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin will be holding a phone call on Tuesday. The United States is pushing for a quick ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. White House's special envoy Steve Witkoff has visited Russia and met with Vladimir Putin. Ukraine has meanwhile accepted the US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire after talks in Saudi Arabia. Vladimir Putin of Russia, however, has put conditions for long-lasting peace, which includes stopping attempts of remobilization in Ukraine. The Trump administration has claimed that Russia-Ukraine ceasefire deal is a matter of weeks, something that will put an end to a war of 3 years. But Vladimir Putin says that he needs ironclad guarantees before he even agrees to a 30-day truce. What will that phone call really entail? What will it look like? And what are these guarantees that Russia will now put forward? We take this conversation forward. I have with me Ambassador Dr. Deepak Vora. We are with us Ross Feingold, political analyst, Major General Sudhakarji, defense expert, and Professor Madhav Nalapa, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, with us on the broadcast. Let me begin this conversation with Major General Sudhakarji. Major General Sudhakarji, the last time around we were having this conversation, there were 3 demands that had come in from Russia. The first demand was a neutral status for Ukraine, that no military of any foreign country shall be allowed to operate on Ukrainian soil. The second demand was that all NATO ambitions must be kept at bay. And the third was that areas that have been annexed by Russia, such as Crimea, and other areas that have been, or other regions that have been taken over by Russia, such as Donbass, may in fact have to be accepted as Russian territory. Now Russia says that it's ready to hold a phone call with the United States of America. What do you think this phone call could entail?
Devika, good evening. Thank you for getting me to your show, and my best wishes to very distinguished and esteemed co-panelists on the subject. With regard to the question that you are asking, this phone call is aimed at bringing ceasefire into effect. How that ceasefire is going to come about is a matter of time, but why am I saying this is a very complex issue. Many of us, all the Western alliance stakeholders, they point a finger at Putin, that Russia is to be blamed, whereas if you sequence the chronological study of the history, then I think, I'm convinced, I am very deeply convinced as a student of geopolitics and military science, that there is a huge trust deficit which has been demonstrated by none other than US. Regardless of the fact, because it depends how deep you want to go, how back you want to go back in time. If you sequence, let's say, with the end of Cold War, and when James Baker, the speaker, the Secretary of State, had paid a visit to Moscow in his sitting with Mikhail Gorbachev of 9th of February 1990, when USSR was not amenable to the merger or collapse of the Berlin Wall, and Mikhail Gorbachev had given out one condition, that you have to reassure that not an inch will the sphere of influence of NATO will expand, not only in East Germany, but in the entire frontage of Europe. So if that be, it is there on record. It's there. There's a white paper existing everywhere. You just Google up, you'll find. If that is the kind of assurance based on which the merger of Germany had taken place, and consequent to that, I am actually petrified to see what is the 20th or 21st century taking us to. Here is a superpower which made a very substantive, meaningful commitment for global peace and harmony. See the speed, the speed at which the number of NATO members have expanded from 12 founding members way back in 1949. It has reached a figure of 32. When you talk about the 1999, the Czech Republic, the Hungary and the Poland having joined NATO, and thereafter 2007, seven of them came in votes and joined NATO, and Putin is making a statement in 2008 in the Munich conference that stop this, no further expansion. So you have not only provocated a country, but you have actually posed a threat of its existence. And more than that, the anti-ballistic missile, which was lasting since 70s, suddenly US withdraws from in 2002 and thereafter deploys the Aegis missiles along closer to the border with the Russia or the USSR. So if these kind of things happen, the Black Sea, which never witnessed any movement of the frigates of the NATO alliance parties, particularly United Kingdom, you start seeing the ships and construction of the ports in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov. So which country, if Russia does the same thing to, let's say, North America, say in Canada or Mexico, will USA ever accept a development of this? Isn't this going to be taken as an existential security threat? If it is yes, then I think it's about time that tomorrow's talk should be substantive, meaningful, and attention must be paid to meet the aspiration of the security architecture, which will actually balance out the requirements between two nations. That is Russia first, followed by, it has to be understood, why did Russia invade? It's very easy to point a finger. But if you want a permanent solution, one needs to understand the meaning and the trust deficit, the way it has been actually built up by none other than, it's a different issue, Devika. Well, there are factors within US as to why Bill Clinton signed an agreement with the welcoming the open door policy to NATO sometime in 2004, 2007, if I recall correctly. Thereafter, every new president has come, he has followed. George Bush came Jr. Thereafter, number of them have come, they have accepted blindly. Nobody has questioned. The question that should have been raised at that point in time, whose deep stake does USA have a foreign policy as in today? Whether it is Middle East or the Central Europe, does Europe's foreign policy has been hijacked? Donald Trump would do good if they actually bring back or take back the foreign policy from the deep state to its own hand and make meaningful steps so that the peace and harmony can be restored back in places where the conflict is raging for past 3 years. Back to you.
All right. I want to bring in Mr. Ross Feingold into the conversation. Mr. Feingold, in your assessment, how critical is it for Donald Trump to now deliver on his promise of ending the Russia-Ukraine war? And to what extent do you think Donald Trump will now be willing to listen to what is it that Russia truly wants at the end of the negotiations?
President Trump and his advisors, his spokespeople, there's a phrase that they like to use. They say, promises made, promises kept. So certainly President Trump wants to make good on his campaign promise to bring about a ceasefire or even an end to the war. It's very important to him. It's his personal credibility because he said so many times that he could bring about a ceasefire or an end to the war. He even said he would be able to do it on his first day. Obviously, that did not occur. But it doesn't change his desire to be the key person who actually brings about a ceasefire. So I think he's going to continue to pursue this no matter how difficult it might be, because again, it is his personal credibility that's on the line. Just to get a 30-day ceasefire, Russia is probably not going to get everything that it wants, and Ukraine is probably not going to get everything that it wants. But this is where President Trump's skill as a negotiator, and he likes to make us think that he is an excellent negotiator, this is really the kind of situation where his negotiation skills, his powers of persuasion are going to be really key. So we'll see what happens with this phone call with Putin. How insistent is Putin on with regard to some of these conditions that he's talked about for the war to end? And keeping in mind, what we're looking at or what we're trying to achieve initially is a 30-day ceasefire. It's not meant to be the equivalent of the end of the war. So those conditions that Putin wants, they might apply for an end to the war, but don't necessarily apply for a ceasefire. But again, President Trump has made himself the key man here, and now it's up to him to try and bring about the ceasefire.
Okay, I want to bring in Ambassador Deepak Vora into the conversation. Ambassador Vora, for a very long time, Donald Trump has been saying that Volodymyr Zelensky does not have any cards left to play anymore. and perhaps rightly so, because Donald Trump has made it very clear that without the support of the US and also Europe, Ukraine would not have been able to sustain the war thus far. But as far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, what are the cards that he perhaps will be playing as far as the negotiations with the United States of America are concerned, in your assessment?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. Honored, delighted to be with you. I have just one comment. You have General Sudhakarji. I just heard him. I respect him enormously. You have Mr. Feingold, and you have Professor Madhav Nalapa. Three of them, thank you very much. I'm going off for dinner. They are much smarter than I am, much smarter than the rest of us put together. Now, your question here is about what does Vladimir Putin want? What he has said from the very beginning. I've served in the post-Soviet space as ambassador in 4 countries. I know that region backwards. I've met Mr. Putin a few times. I speak his language. What has he said? No NATO, no Nazification, demilitarization. Has he changed that? Has he said it should rejoin Russia? But what about the clown of Kiev? Sorry, whatever the Begins, not Beginsky. What's his name? The Ukrainian fellow? Zelensky, sorry. He keeps begging, so I call him Beginsky. And this fellow, what does he want? I'm going to go into Moscow. I want nuclear weapons. I don't want peace. Putin is subhuman. Putin is a war criminal. Putin is a genocidaire. And then suddenly he said, okay, I'm willing to talk about peace. The man has lost his marbles. How do you deal with a fellow like this? He called them subhumans. He called them orcs, O-R-K-S. Ma'am, please look at this, The Lord of the Rings. It's a very, very pejorative term. You don't talk like this and then say, okay, I'm willing to look for. And then he has decreed, by the way, that nobody will talk to Putin while Putin is president of the Russian Federation. The man has lost his marbles. He's gone berserk. And now what President Donald Trump is saying, look, the first thing is I need to focus on China. So get Ukraine out of the way. He's gotten Ukraine out of the way. Afghanistan, he was going to get out of the way, but then he lost his job, and that elderly senile fellow took over as president of the United States, and he got out of Afghanistan. Now Mr. Trump is back, President Trump, whom I've met, he's back. He is determined to achieve what he wants. He has said that he's going to talk to Vladimir Putin in the next 24 hours. He's going to talk about land. He's going to talk about power plants. He's talking about Zaporizhzhia, the nuclear power plant. Who's going to control that, etc., etc. He wants to leave no stone unturned in securing a deal. Ma'am, he is a businessman. He is the, what can I say? He's the baron of business, just as Narendra Modi is the Nawab of negotiation. So they're going to talk, he and Vladimir Putin, and say, all right, buddy, this is what I want, give it to me. I haven't changed my stance from day one. The other fellow keeps saying this, that. And now, by the way, that 1 month thing also, I just saw him 10 minutes ago saying, oh, no, 1 month is not enough. I need 5 years or something like that for a ceasefire. And then he's told his European chaps, you fellows are useless. You've done nothing. You made me believe I was greater than Napoleon, and now you've all abandoned me. What a clown this fellow is, ma'am. I should send him a copy of Chanakya Niti in Ukrainian so he can read it and understand that you can't depend on others for your security. So my take is, ma'am, to conclude, I'm sorry I gave a lengthy peroration, that the talk tomorrow is going to lead to a ceasefire. Whether Zelensky likes it or not, he's excluded. So is that racket, that 80-year-old grandmother in New York. I think it used to be called the United Nations. I don't know what it's called now. Completely excluded. It's these two characters, President Donald Trump, I affectionately call him McDonald Trump, and Vladimir Putin, who are going to decide, as they have done with Gaza, they are going to decide the future of Ukraine. Denazified, demilitarized, neutral. And NATO, all right, come back in 3,000 years, we'll talk about it. This is going to happen tomorrow.
Okay, Professor Nalapath, bring you into the conversation. Professor Nalapath, what do you think will become the future then of Volodymyr Zelensky? Would his replacement perhaps be a part of the larger talks between the US and Russia?
Look, I'd like to say, Devika, and if you saw Sunday Guardian yesterday, I said very flatly that this is not the kind of peace that Vladimir Putin would accept. And I think it's been proved right so far. The point is that the conditions that Ambassador Vora sets are eminently realistic, and they are not going to be met by Donald Trump. Donald Trump is president of the United States for 4 years. At the end of 4 years, he's off. You might get a Democrat in, for example, and who might change the policy completely into a pro-Ukraine policy and admit Ukraine into NATO. So Putin has given concession after concession on return for promise after promise throughout Eastern Europe, and he's been met with, frankly, the scrapping of those promises in months or years. So I would like to say, Devika, I find it difficult to believe that President Putin is going to have, in one conversation, is going to sort this issue out. I think it's going to take both presidents a meeting and both presidents 5-6 rounds of intense activity before I think something is sorted out. For a simple reason that demilitarization is not on the cards where Zelensky is concerned. He says very flatly, I'm going to continue to mobilize. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is going to continue to send weapons to Ukraine. He's going to restart that. So what will the Russians be thinking of that? He's completely transformed his policy and made a U-turn. And now essentially he's doing what the European countries want him to do, which is have a brief ceasefire, give Zelensky some respite, give him a chance to rearm, give him a chance to replenish his depleted manpower, and then get back into the battle. That's not what Putin wants at all. So I find it difficult to believe that you're going to have an agreement without several rounds of discussion and several rounds of action on the part of the Ukrainian side. Zelensky, there's a law in Ukraine which he got passed under the constitution. You can't talk to the Russians. Secondly, he said openly, after the ceasefire discussion was initiated by the US, he's going to continue mobilization, ceasefire or no ceasefire. He's going to continue rearmament. And President Trump has once again, just as Joe Biden did, started replenishing Ukrainian weapons. So I think that would certainly have affected his credibility with Putin. I mean, in a sense, Trump has gone back to the Biden policy after having a very sensible policy of withdrawing the US from the war. Because if the US is withdrawn from the war, I don't think the Europeans are going to dare to get involved. And if the Europeans don't get involved, the danger of what Trump himself said, World War III, both as a candidate and as president, will not come to pass. The Europeans will not be able to do it. So very frankly, Devika, I would love to have peace. Peace is important, but it cannot be peace on the terms that Zelensky wants. It's essentially the kind of peace that, as of now, the Europeans want. And as for Trump, he has made a U-turn on Ukraine, and that U-turn is, I think, denting his credibility as a deal maker in Russia. So I'd like to say I'm not optimistic. Let's hope I'm wrong, but we'll see. Thank you, David.
Okay, Mr. Feingold, bringing you back into the conversation, I want to understand from your perspective, what do you think then will be the future of Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine? Is that going to be a part of the discussions?
Would already be over possibly if it wasn't for the imposition of martial law and the freezing of elections in Ukraine during a period of martial law. The public it depends on the poll that you read, but clearly there's a portion of the public in Ukraine that wants peace as quickly as possible. They don't necessarily agree with Zelensky's approach to the war or even his approach to ceasefire or long-term peace talks. So Ukraine at some point will need to have an election. And it's very possible that other candidates in the election will be much more in favor of a deal. And their campaign message will be, if you want immediate peace, I'm the candidate who's willing to make a deal with Russia. I'm willing to agree to some of the conditions that Russia is imposing. I'm not going to attempt to join NATO, et cetera, et cetera. So this, as much as this originally began as an issue for Russia, because it is Russia that invaded Ukraine, at the moment and going forward, this is also very much going to be an issue of domestic Ukrainian politics. That really hasn't started to play out, but as the months go by this year, I think we're going to see more a discussion within Ukraine about who should lead the country going forward, and specifically who should lead the country in any peace talks with Russia.
Okay, Major General Sudhakarji, bringing you back into the conversation, I want to understand from your perspective, is Russia also in a position to continue the war in case some of its conditions are not met? Because as has been outlined by Professor Madhav Nalapat, that somewhere America's credibility as well as its ability to invoke any trust in what it's saying has been dented a little bit with President Donald Trump agreeing to once again supply arms and ammunition to Ukraine after saying that USA wants to withdraw completely from the war. But at the end of the day, Russia has been continuing this war for the past 3 years as well, and it has taken a toll on the Russian economy as well. So when we talk about some of the cards before Russia, what can it really say or do to convince the United States of America to agree to its terms and conditions?
Devika, it's a fantastic point you have raised. The central point of your question is, will Russia continue the conflict if its requirements or the conditions are not met? There is no doubt. It is a geopolitical cost of Putin is very, very heavy, prohibitive. He is left with no option. It is do or die as far as Russia is concerned. Let's have no doubts. And let me take back the minds of our viewers. Take back the minds to the Second World War. Look at the defense industry capability in the world, which has been proven beyond doubt. I'm talking about the resilience. It is the Russian defense capability industry itself. And second thing is, don't underestimate ever the people of Russia. It is the same Russians or the USSR which beat Napoleon Bonaparte, which beat the Hitler. It is the same Russia which, in alliance with the USA, fought the Second World War. Let's not forget about it. It is the same country which has got the largest mineral, largest defense capability. Even today, by the last count, has got the largest number of nuclear arsenals. It's a huge prohibitive cost. Putin, I am a military man, I know his mind, I have been in special ops, I have dealt with intelligence. This man is not going to give up. If at all he gives up, he will say, I do or die. So therefore, he is a man. Look at the political career. So therefore, allow me to make 2-3 quick points. I compliment Professor Nalapat. The start point of bringing some kind of a ceasefire is as is, where is basis. What is as is, where is basis? Is something on the lines of India and Pakistan, the line of control. It has to be, that is the only way to bring the conflict to an end. No, freeze all kinds of military activities along the line of contact. Pull them back by a couple of kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, depending on the terrain and the geography. And thereafter, the most important point is what Professor Nalapat has made. The supply, the conflict has gone on, it has raged for 3 years. It is because the military supply chain is active from America. The America has to stop supplying all the military hardware. Unless it is done, I am afraid no ceasefire, no peace talk, no harmony. It will carry on relentlessly. I would say eternally. This conflict is going to last for another 10 years. It will never come to an end. Last but not the least, Devika, to make some meaningful and substantive go ahead or pave the way for securing his credibility. Because let's not forget about the fact that Donald Trump has come back to power for the second tenure with a resounding majority mandate. The popularity vote that he has won, I don't think any president in past 30, 40 years in USA has ever had that kind of a margin of victory. With that kind of credibility, he owes a lot to the people of America to make it great again. He owes a lot to the global peace, geopolitics, and also, let me also clarify another point. This is a remarkable turnaround by US. US is the superpower which was hell-bent upon saying unipolarity. This is for the first time the Secretary of State had made a statement that they do acknowledge the multipolarity, the emerging world order, and gravitating towards multipolarity. They do understand and accept that it is not US alone. There are countries which are emerging as polycentric world, or people or the countries which have to be taken into consideration to bring about peace and harmony. So therefore there is a huge change. to me, it appears that the talk is going to be, I'm an optimist as a soldier. I'm prepared for the worst kind of eventuality. Yes, I will be. Second thing is, I'm also prepared that I should not make mistakes which I have made in the past. I am not going to be driven by the deep state, come what may. I am also mindful of the fact any supply chain which is going to connect or provide military hardware to Ukraine is no means kind of a method to
Okay.
bring about ceasefire between both the countries. So therefore, the talk is going to be in substantive terms. Otherwise, Putin is going to be very blunt and bring this particular drama going on between USA as the broker of peace. To me, I am afraid that unless USA and Donald Trump assures that this supply of military hardware is going to stop, the ceasefire is going to come into effect based on as is where is. 20% of land which is captured by Russia will continue to remain with Russia. Ukraine has to make do and reconcile with the
Okay.
fact that it will continue to remain neutral with no presence of European troops as the UN forces in the Ukraine. Back to you, Devika.
All right. That's all the time that I have, but I thank all of our panelists for joining us on the broadcast to take this pertinent conversation forward. We will, of course, continue to track further developments through the course of the day tomorrow.